Detective Mara Vellum had seen her share of strange cases, but this one? It reeked of something else. The only DNA found on the shattered window frame belonged to Elias Thorne, a former night security guard at the museum who died in a car crash on April 12, 2023. She sat in the museum's security office, reviewing old footage with the curator, Dr. Halder. It's impossible, he whispered. Elias was a good man, loyal. He wouldn't have touched that painting even if it were on fire. People change, Mara said quietly, even after death, it seems. The dead tell no tales, but sometimes their silence screams. As the investigation continued, more anomalies surfaced. The museum's security system had glitched during the heist. Recordings scrambled, timestamps looping. But Mara's tech expert, Juno, pulled out something bizarre from the fragments. A low-quality image showed the silhouette of a man standing in front of the missing painting, moments before it vanished. Grainy, shadowy, but unmistakably real. He wore a faded uniform, and the ID badge hanging from his chest clearly read E. Thorne Burse. His posture, the slight limp, the way he tilted his head when thinking, it was exactly how Elias used to stand. Digging into Elias's past, Mara obtained a warrant and visited his old apartment. The landlord, who never rented the place after Elias's death, handed her the keys with trembling hands. Sometimes I hear footsteps up there, he said. Midnight, always at midnight. The place was untouched, dust clung to every surface like time had frozen. But in the closet she found something shocking. A journal. Most pages were mundane, notes about shifts, museum gossip. But the last 6 entries turned cryptic. She talks to me from the frame now. They watch through the paint. She's not a widow, she's a prisoner. Mara turned to the last line, scribbled, frantic. If he leaves the frame, I follow. Mara had the apartment swept and found a tiny camera embedded in the smoke detector. Live feed. Someone had been watching the apartment for months. The signal traced back to an IP routed through multiple proxies, but Juno cracked it. A dormant server in the museum's own network, hidden beneath layers of inactive code. Someone inside the museum had embedded spyware. He confronted Dr. Halder, but he denied everything. Elias came to me once, he admitted instead. 3 months before he died, he said the painting was whispering to him that she was trying to escape. And you didn't report that? Would you have? We ignore the mad until their madness becomes prophecy. The Widow's Veil was painted by Erasmus Kor, a Dutch artist known for his disturbing techniques. Rumors claimed he mixed human ashes into his pigments. Many of his subjects died mysteriously. All his works are in private collections or destroyed. Except this one. Historians believed the woman in the painting was Erasmus's mistress, a woman who vanished shortly after the painting was completed. Some whispered she was sealed inside the painting, an occult metaphor, or a literal truth. Mara wasn't sure anymore. The deeper she dug, the stranger it got. Old records showed that Elias's great-grandfather once owned the painting and had gone insane before burning down his own home, muttering about a woman who won't stop watching. 3 days later, Mara's phone received a voicemail. No number. The message was short. Static followed, then a faint whisper. Mara. Of the same night, a museum janitor died of a heart attack, face frozen in horror, hands clutched around a sketchbook. Inside it, a perfect charcoal drawing of Elias standing beside the missing painting, pointing directly at the viewer. Juno made a breakthrough. Using heat imaging from a drone, she discovered abnormal temperature patterns under the museum. Old blueprints revealed sealed tunnels from the Prohibition era, when the museum served as a secret society's meeting point. Some believe they worshipped artifacts that hold the soul. Mara entered the tunnels with a small team. What they found was not listed in any records. A hidden chamber, candles, symbols etched into the walls, and in the center, a pedestal, a smear of red paint, and Elias Thorne's badge, lying in the dust. Mara didn't move. The reflection in the mirror held her breath, just like her, but it wasn't her. The face behind the veil was older, more angular, with eyes hollowed by centuries of silence. Then, in the blink of an eye, the mirror returned to normal, just Mara, wild-eyed and pale. She stumbled backward, breathing heavily, reaching for her service weapon. But something on her wrist stopped her. A streak of red paint. When reality cracks, what pours out isn't madness. It's truth no one was meant to see. News broke the next day. A security guard spotted walking the eastern corridor of the Wehrmacht Museum on a night no staff were scheduled. Surveillance footage showed it clearly this time. Frame by frame, it was Elias Thorn, but not as he was in life. This Elias flickered, glitched, like light distorted by water. His face was half in shadow, and when the camera zoomed in, the image pixelated in one disturbing frame, revealing an empty skull under the cap. Mara questioned Dr. Halder again. This time, he cracked. "I didn't mean to deceive anyone," he said. "The painting was decaying. 2 months before Elias died, I approved a covert restoration. Quiet, off books. We had no idea. No idea what." Halder brought her to a sealed case in the archives. Inside was an X-ray scan of the painting taken before the restoration. Beneath the image of the veiled widow was a second portrait. Another woman, younger, screaming, her hands reaching out from the canvas. "She wasn't alone," Halder whispered. "There were 2 souls trapped in the painting. You can bury the past in varnish and pigment, but spirits bleed through the cracks." Mara tracked down the art restorer, Marcellus Bain, now residing in a psychiatric institution. His file said he was found 3 weeks after the restoration, wandering a forest, muttering about the crying paint. He agreed to speak with her. "She was angry when I touched her," he said, eyes darting to the corners of the room. "Not the widow. The one beneath. She screamed inside my head until I gave her a face." He pointed to a drawing he kept hidden in his mattress. It was the missing version of the painting. The veiled woman now stood behind another figure, Elias Thorn. Both figures were fading into Mara. Some art is never meant to be restored. It restores itself through you. Mara exhumed Elias Thorn's body. The coroner had ruled it a simple car crash, but something felt staged. When the coffin was opened, silence fell. The body was still dressed in its security uniform, but the hands were missing. Not rotted, severed. Tucked inside the jacket pocket was a folded note, written in a sharp, angular script. "She is not gone, she is becoming." The grave soil beneath the coffin had traces of linseed oil, turpentine, and vermilion paint. "The dead don't rest when art becomes resurrection." Junos' digging uncovered a strange connection. In the early 1900s, a secret group of curators across Europe exchanged letters coded with references to the Veiled One. They called themselves the Framesmen. Their belief? That certain works of art weren't simply cursed, they were portals, carriers of essence. They believed that souls could be bound to canvas. One name appeared in those letters repeatedly. Reginald Vellum. Mara froze. Her great-grandfather? Her family had been connected to this long before she was born. Back in her apartment, Mara fell into uneasy sleep. At 3:17 IAM, the exact time the painting vanished. Her smoke alarm chirped. She rose, instinctively checking her mirror. No one. But across her wall, something new had appeared. A faint outline. The beginnings of a painting. Brushstrokes of red and black smeared across the plaster. It wasn't there yesterday. In the center, a silhouette of Elias. Behind him, the woman. And behind her, a third, unknown figure, just eyes. Dozens of them, watching. Sometimes the missing piece isn't a person. It's the watcher, the one behind the frame. A former museum night guard, now living under an alias, contacted Mara. His voice trembled. "You don't understand. The painting's never gone. It just moves. It appears in places no one dares look." "What do you mean?" There's a room beneath the museum, a gallery not listed on any map. Elias found it once. He told me about the eyes. And the voice that kept asking for Mara. Why would it know me? You're the last vellum, she's calling you home. The mirrors didn't show the real world. They reflected something older, cracked, worn, like an oil painting left in the rain. Mara stepped deeper into the chamber, her flashlight flickered. The closer she got to the painting, the colder the air became, not a chill of weather, but of time, of stagnation. The widow's veil hung there, veil now lifted, revealing the woman's face. Except, it wasn't a painting anymore, it was her skin. The texture of flesh, pale and damp, stretched across a wooden frame. The woman's eyes, glass-like but aware, watched Mara with a kind of recognition. Then something inside the frame moved. Some canvases are not painted, they're offered. Juno called. I found something in the National Archives, she said. It's encrypted, but I cracked parts of it. A ledger, an inventory. Of what? People. Names, dates, paintings. She sent Mara a scan. There were 37 entries, all marked with codes, locations, and artistic mediums. Oils, sketches. Each entry listed the name of the subject and the curator who sealed them. At number 12, The Widow's Veil. Subject, Arabella Vellum. Curator, Reginald Vellum. Status, incomplete binding. Mara's throat went dry. Arabella, her ancestor. Her family hadn't just been involved, they had sacrificed one of their own. But what haunted Mara more was entry 38, added in red ink, much later. The name was half smeared but legible. Subject, Mayhem. Status, pending manifestation. The date was blank, but the initials were hers. Was this all leading to her? Was she next? Mara printed the page and pinned it on her wall. Then she noticed something she hadn't before. On the margins of the scan, faint symbols were etched, like someone had traced them in graphite. The same symbols she'd seen on the walls beneath the museum. One symbol stood out, a circle with 3 overlapping eyes. She'd seen it before, carved into the handle of Elias' knight baton. When you are chosen by the frame, the brush has already touched your soul. Mara went to the museum that night, not as a detective, but in uniform. A guy, just like Elias. She walked the same halls, traced his same steps, past the now empty wall where the widow's veil had once hung. At 3:17 IEM, the eastern corridor lights flickered, and she stopped. In the reflection of a glass display case, Elias stood behind her, but not his corpse. His spirit. His face gaunt, stretched thin by years beyond death. His mouth didn't move, but his voice echoed inside her skull. Face. And I'm like, don't look away. If you see her, you stay. If you blink, you take her place. Suddenly, an entire section of the museum she'd never seen before shifted into view, like reality folding. An archway appeared. On the other side, a black room, matte walls, no lights. Inside, she saw it. The real gallery, the one no blueprint mentioned. Each wall held a canvas, and in each canvas was a person, real, living, conscious, but painted. Eyes blinking, lips moving, silently screaming. She recognized 2 of them, the janitor who died of a heart attack, and Marcellus Bain, the restorer. They were inside the art, but there was one empty frame at the center, labeled simply Mara. Every portrait begins with an outline you've been sketched your entire life. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind her. It was Dr. Halder. You were never investigating the crime, he said softly. You were fulfilling it. He explained everything. How the framesmen still existed, how Elias had tried to stop them, how Mara had been marked from birth. She's inside you now, he said. The widow. She's waking. Myra could feel it too, her fingers trembling, her reflection sometimes blinking out of sync, thoughts that weren't hers creeping in like a second consciousness. She needs a vessel, Holder said. You're the final stroke of the masterpiece. Before Hodder could complete the ritual, before he could bind Mara to the canvas, Elias appeared again. Not a ghost this time, but half-formed, dragging trails of smoke and pigment behind him. A being between worlds. He grabbed Holder by the arm. Holder screamed as his skin began to crack, flaking into flakes of dried paint. You sealed her, Elias said, voice no longer human. Now you'll take her place. Mara could only watch as Halder was pulled into one of the blank frames, his mouth open in an endless scream. The painting shimmered, and the widow's veil reappeared, but now Elias stood beside the woman. He looked at Mara. You have one chance left, but you must go where I could not. Back in her apartment, Mara opened Elias's journal one last time. A new entry had appeared, in her own handwriting. She's no longer behind the veil, she's walking through me. She looked at her hands, faint brushstrokes now etched into her skin. She blinked, and in the mirror, her eyes were no longer hers. They were hers. The canvas pulsed, and as Juno stood frozen before the painting in Mara's apartment, she could swear it exhaled, just once. A breath soft but real. Paint cracked slightly near Mara's collar in the portrait, revealing skin beneath. Girl skin. She reached toward it, but just before her fingers touched the canvas, she heard it. Mara's voice. Not from the phone, not from the room, from the painting. Hey, Juno, don't finish the frame. Determined to find answers, Juno returned to the old Vellum estate, Mara's childhood home, long since abandoned. The front door was open. Inside, dust coated the walls, but in the center of the foyer sat a covered painting. It hadn't been there years ago. Pulling the cloth away, Juno gasped. It was hard, framed, but incomplete. Only her eyes and mouth were painted. Everything else, hands, torso, surroundings, was empty, waiting for the brush. Pinned beside it was a letter. In Allows Thorne's handwriting, the fourth completes the veil and becomes the fifth. The painting doesn't end when the subject is trapped. It begins again when the viewer stares too long. Juno took the painting and returned to Viremont Museum, where renovations were quietly being done to cover the disappearance. But the moment she stepped inside, time fractured. It was 3:17 a.m. again. No staff, no lights, no doors. Only corridors that kept looping back to the same exhibit. And then finally, the painting she carried was no longer blank. It showed the museum, and in the window, herself, walking toward it. Sometimes places trap you, not with walls, but with reflections of your own arrival. Deeper inside, Juno found a room built of mirrors, like the one Mara had described before Vanishing. And standing in its center, back turned, was Mara. Mara? The woman turned. Her face was cracked down the middle, pigment bleeding from her nose like ink, but her eyes were still hers. You can't let her finish it, Mara whispered. She needs 4 to walk through completely. I stopped it at 3, but you're holding the last piece. The widow. She was never just a woman. She was the idea of grief turned sentient, a mourning so deep it became its own entity. Before Juno could speak again, a figure stepped through the mirrored wall. Elias Thorne, but not as ghost or shade, as something reborn. A being half man, half brushstroke. His skin crackled with dried oils. His hands left trails of crimson in the air. He looked at Mara and Juno with sorrow. I tried to stop her, he said, but I opened the door when I restored her. Now she wants to be seen forever. She feeds on the act of witnessing. Each gaze gives her shape. Mira nodded. It's why she wants a fourth, a final viewer. You, they said in unison, looking at Juno. We become cursed not when we touch the haunted, but when we understand it. Juno was pulled into the mirror. On the other side wasn't a reflection. It was the true gallery of the bound. Thousands of frames stretched into black infinity. Each held a piece of someone, an eye, a mouth, a scream. One by one, the portraits turned toward her, whispering, she's almost whole. And then, in the center of the space, the widow's veil, fully complete, veil off, arms extended, face no longer blank but shifting between Mara, Arabella, and Juno. Elias handed Juno a brush. You have a choice, he said. Finish the fourth or destroy the frame, but either will take you. Every masterpiece demands its final touch. And its final witness. Juno stared at the brush. I don't want to be her, she said. She doesn't care what you want, Mara said quietly. But she can't survive without form, and form requires consent. I didn't consent. The gallery, Juno turned the brush toward the canvas and snapped it in half. It screamed. The widow shrieked, her arms clawing toward them as the walls collapsed, frames shattering like glass. Elias grabbed Mara and Juno, pulling them through the falling mirror light. They awoke in the museum lobby. They lied. Normal exhibits, no signs of the night's chaos. Dua turned to Mara. Is it over? Mara hesitated. We broke the brush. We closed the fourth. What? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at a nearby display. Inside it, a mirror. Their reflections looked back, all except for Elias. His reflection was smiling. That night, a cleaning crew found a canvas lying in the eastern wing. It was unsigned, no label, but when anyone looked away, they couldn't quite remember what they'd seen. One curator took a photo of it. In the picture, they later noticed something. In the corner, almost invisible, written in tiny red ink, she sees you, always.